So feel free to take one out of the bag and we'll get started.
All right, so if doing something brings me pleasure, then it is ethical. Consuming animal products gives me pleasure. Therefore, it's ethical to kill animals for food. Consuming animals gives them pleasure. Okay, if we go off of it just biologically, I'm guessing. I'm not expert on biology or anything like this, but basically there is this innate instinct, or what should I say, like a frame of action that your body gives you that says if something brings you pain, you stop doing it, right? And if something gives you pleasure, you keep on doing it.
Yeah.
So in that regard, the body in a way is saying to you, when something gives you pleasure, this one is good, keep going. And if something gives you pain, this one is bad. And the body is telling you that's not a good thing for you, for your survival.
We've evolved to have pleasure as a reward, to increase the behaviours that are good for us or good for our reproduction. And we've evolved to feel pain, which signifies bad things that our body doesn't want us to do, or our genes perhaps don't want us to do because they're bad for our reproduction or bad for our survival.
In that regard, arguing that it's unethical to do something that the body tells you should do by giving you pleasure means that the whole mechanism of existence, the way the body is set up, is unethical.
Okay. Let me ask you this then. Let's say
that was a good argument. My guy on this side is going.
Let me say that. Let's say that there's a woman who doesn't want to have sex with me, but if I force myself on her, it gives me a lot of pleasure. And pleasure is a signifier for good things. My genes want me to do it because it increases my chances of reproduction. Is it ethical for me to have sex with her without her consent because it brings me pleasure?
So first I'm going to try and remove some things right away. So is it the false equivalence, first of all, to rape someone or just to kill an animal?
Let me put it in the words of this argument here then. If doing something brings me pleasure, then it is ethical. Raping gives me pleasure, therefore it's ethical to rape.
But that's a condemnation on the... I see. Because the way that is being set up, now it's a condemnation on the person just by saying it. Because rape has been it's been established within society that rape is wrong. Which means that whenever they say that rape gives them pleasure, they already condemn themselves and admit that they're being unethical. Whereas killing animals for food has not yet been established by society to be wrong. Which means that it doesn't follow automatically under the unethical part of things that you can do. We are arguing here whether we should or should not put it on that list where rape already is.
Well, I guess.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
I'm not sure because
so there. Let's say that we separate the things that human beings can do into unethical and ethical.
This is an argument for why something is ethical. This is how we categorize it as ethical. And the argument is if it brings me pleasure, it's ethical.
I see, but so that means that it hasn't been decided yet. The fact that there is an argument that means that it hasn't been decided yet whether killing animals for food is ethical or not. We're having an argument about it. We're trying to decide whether to put it in the ethical category or unethical category because there's a question about it.
And the argument for it being ethical is that it gives you pleasure.
Now, but however, we're comparing it the way you gave it back to me. We're comparing it to rape, and rape has already been established to be unethical. So if someone uses it in that context, it gives me pleasure. It's just condemnation on themselves by saying it. Because they just admitted that something unethical gives them pleasure, which makes them...
No, but the argument is that rape is ethical because it gives them pleasure.
That's why it's a false equivalence, because that's what I'm saying. Rape has already been established by society that to be unethical.
We can use a different analogy that will probably be simpler, rather than maybe human suffering. Let's talk about bullfighting in places where it's legal.
Okay, I think this one is... Maybe this one is better. I don't want to say great yet because I haven't thought it through, but I think this one is much better than a rape one.
So bullfighting...
with the hurting of
Yeah, so I guess essentially they stab the bull to death in an arena where people watch. And let's say the act of having a spear, throwing it at the bull, killing them...
It creates entertainment.
Yes, it creates
in
pleasure.
A way, pleasure, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it ethical because it gives people pleasure? Yeah.
And if I can't prove that, then this one falls apart as well. Killing the animal in the arena creates entertainment, gives you pleasure, and because it gives you pleasure, it's not. This means that this argument is wrong,
Okay, let's do a different one.
which doesn't necessarily mean that I'm against killing.
Right, it can still be moral for a different reason.
But the argument has been debunked. So if anyone ever tries to say it's because it gives me pleasure, and that's why it's ethical, it doesn't work because compared to the bulls in the
Right.
arena.
You gave it a good go. Let's try a different one. There's probably some better ones in there.
Human suffering is more important. I think we got a good one here. And therefore it's moral to kill animals for food. To continue in the brackets, there are no brackets, but something that's been unspoken, to alleviate human suffering.
I guess that's not the argument that they're making.
Well, I think on the contrary.
Human suffering is more important, therefore it's moral to kill animals for food.
You kill animals for food to alleviate human suffering. That's the implied argument. Human suffering is more important, which means, let's say, the suffering of animals the argument is the suffering of animals goes below the suffering of humans. So killing animals for food will alleviate some of the human suffering. For example, let's say someone is hungry, that causes suffering to the person, or starving, that causes suffering. Killing an animal for food will alleviate his suffering, and human suffering is more important. That's the bit.
Do you agree that human suffering
is it more important than animal suffering?
Yeah.
That's the bit that we have to defend in order to justify that it's moral to kill animals. I think this one is the best one out of the. This is the moral man's argument. A man who cares about humans.
Do you think that human suffering matters more?
Would I give, if I go past a homeless person with a dog, and I see that both the dog and the human person, and the human on the street are starving, and I have food in my hand, enough for only one of them. Will I give it to the dog or will I give it to the human?
I guess the difficulty with real life situations like this is that we might imagine there might be reason to believe that the human is suffering more than the dog. But I suppose
so you would examine which of the two beings is suffering more, and then you would give that one the food. Which is a terribly empirical way of looking at the dilemma. If we give it to the dog might not necessarily be able to provide food for the human. Whereas if you give it to the human might be able to take care of the dog.
Reduce the animal suffering. But let me give you a hypothetical that we've got a situation where we've got two beings who are suffering exactly the same.
One is an animal, the other one is a human.
Yeah, and you can press a button.
You can just give them food. Let's get away from the buttons bit. But yeah, you can just give them a certain amount of food that you have for only one of them.
Yes, but it reduces the exact same amount of suffering.
Yes.
And which would you want to choose?
The logical bit, however, I'm not saying that's what I do, but coming from your argument, the logical thing to do is to give it to the human, because you would assume that the human would help the dog.
See, this would be changing. This is changing the. This is why I wanted to stick to more of an abstract hypothetical, because that means that giving it to the human would reduce more suffering. And what I'm trying to get at is the suffering is the same, and you've got two beings. One's a human, one's an animal. The suffering you reduce is the same. Is there a reason to favour the human suffering?
I see, but there's a problem with us keeping it in the abstract, because we're talking about a very tangible, real issue, which is killing of animals for food. If we are able to defend this position in the abstract, and that turns out to be a disaster in the real world, I don't think that's a good outcome. I think we should try and find the real situation.
Let me give you a real situation then. So we've got, but that one's more complex because you're saying, because I'm trying to ask you whose suffering matters more, and you're altering the hypothetical, and you're saying that because if you give it to the human, that also reduces the animal's suffering, and therefore you're reducing more suffering overall. But that's not answering. Yes, yeah. But that's not answering the question of which suffering is more important. That's answering the question of which reduces the most suffering.
That's why I said the logical thing to do is that if you want to help both of them.
Right. So let's use a hypothetical where it isn't that helping a human reduces more suffering, because that's not the question I'm interested in. So let's say that you got a homeless person and you've got an ape, a gorilla, and both of these are going to die in an hour's time. And in the last 5 minutes, one of them needs to be stabbed, and they're going to feel exactly the same amount of pain and suffering, and then they'll die. So they're both going to die, but only one of them will suffer for the last 5 minutes.
But you don't know.
This is a hypothetical where we're controlling the variables.
Exactly, but you are removing human will from the equation. You're removing the freedom of choice. Because the person you would give the food to, if you give them food, and if you want to save both of them. Let's say you want to save only the animal. You would give the food to the animal. That will be a certain way of saving only the animal. Because you don't know that the animal will go of its own accord and try and fight food for the human. Let's say you want to save both of them. Or
The question is just which
Which
suffering
one you wanna
matters
save?
more.
Well, again, there is a consequence to which one you choose. If you choose the animal, there is no guarantee that the human will survive.
In the,
But
in the hypothetical I gave you, so they're both dying in an hour.
Exactly, but you don't know that because the
But
human.
they are. So in this hypothetical, because it's a hypothetical. If we stay away from these arguments that you're dealing with from like a third party, and let's go for your personal beliefs. Do you think it's moral to kill animals for food?
Killing animals for food means killing animals so we can feed ourselves, so that we can keep on living.
Do you
Because we haven't found a way to live without food yet. Maybe it's possible. If it's possible, that would be great because we don't have to kill animals.
Do you think it's possible to live without consuming animal products?
We're going away from that bit. No, it's a different question, right?
So I'm asking
Because it obviously is because people are vegan
Right.
and they live without killing animals.
So we need to consume food, but we
But
don't.
that doesn't necessarily mean that it's immoral to kill animals.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
possible because of course it's possible. I guess humans have a very arbitrary other people.
But I wanted to know
I
about
don't
your
say- by
your
the way-
position.
By the way, yeah.
How you feel about it? Like, do you think it's ethical to kill animals for food because we need to consume food to survive?
Say this. Let's say that it matters. So let's say that it depends on how dire the situation is.
Okay.
Let's say people in the Arctic who
what
are
about
freezing and
your
stuff.
situation?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on the situation. So let's say if there's abundant food around you,
Uh-huh.
you wouldn't have to kill the dog
Right.
to survive.
Yes.
And to feed yourself. I don't want to say to survive because we haven't established whether or not it's impossible to live without food. Even though every single person around us would testify to the opposite.
If you need to survive, you think it can be justified?
Let's say we're in the Arctic,
Yeah.
a plane crash, and we're starving, ice, and there's a dog with us. Well, the dog will die from the cold anyway, and then it's.
What if we're in a situation of
What
like
if
living in London, not a survival situation? Let's say you're living in London.
But yeah, again, as I said, the circumstances change.
Yeah.
change.
So
Whether
what
it's
about
moral or not
is
will
it
depend on-
is it moral in London?
Horrible thing. I can feel the traps. I can feel the traps coming. All right. First of all, I've never tried dog meat. I don't care for it. I don't think it's a good idea to kill dogs for food because it might be unsanitary.
But do you think that killing animals for food in London
Do you want
Will
me
be
to give you
moral.
my actual real opinion on this?
Absolutely, I do. Yes.
You're certainly more moral than the universe, than the universe itself, and the way than the universe and the way the world is set up and the way we live. Because, never mind humans killing animals for food. What about other animals killing other animals for food? Why? Why does there have to be killing of animals? Why?
I guess evolution is
No, no, no,
indifferent
no, no.
to suffering.
I'm not asking this as a rhetorical question. Should the case be that there's a God who created the universe? Should the case be? What the fuck? Why? Why did you have to make it? Why the he? She. It sounds more like a she, by the way. women are more. Oh, this is gonna be deleted. They're, from what I see, women are more prone to murder than men are, even though the statistics show otherwise. It's just that they're incapable of doing so, but the instinct is there and the desire is there. So I would say she. Why would she create a world like this? Why?
I think like the fact that the universe is indifferent to suffering and there's so much suffering is terrible. But
why does the wolf have to kill the sheep?
yeah,
Why would the world, the planet, would be set up in a way where one animal has to consume the other one?
yeah. It's.
If-
I agree with you that it's messed up,
and
but we're kind of
but
pivoting
this
from
is
the
the
we're pivoting from the important question
No,
here.
that's the
I want to
important
know.
question.
I want to know.
No, that's the important question. We as human beings find it to be messed up. That's the important bit. We find that there's something wrong with this. As moral authority on the planet, on the earth, human beings, most of us, even the ones that kill the animals for food, somewhere deep, they wouldn't want to have to do this. They might enjoy. So all the arguments, they might enjoy the pleasure of it, the taste of the meat. If they could get the taste of the meat without killing.
Which I understand what you're saying, but we're talking
without
about
killing
other
the animal,
people's
that would be great
positions.
for them.
I want to know if you think that it's moral to kill animals for food in the
Well,
Western world.
I think we established that it's messed up.
You think it's morally wrong?
No. Let's not get it mixed up, because that way we're gonna blame other human beings, which might agree with us, who might engage in killing of animals for food, which will make them just a part of the whole system the way it's been set up, which makes them blameless. Even though you may be coming from a good place, you're trying to put a moral imperative on other people.
Do you think I have a moral responsibility not to slit that dog's throat? Right now. To go over to that dog and slit the dog's throat.
If you do so, I won't hold it against you as a human being.
You don't think it would be morally wrong?
I'm not saying that it wouldn't be morally wrong. It wouldn't be morally wrong.
To slit the dog's throat?
No.
Why?
Because morally wrong would apply to humans.
For me to slit the dog's throat?
And this is why. I don't want to say. I'm happy
Oh,
to-
I see. You're saying...
And this is why. There is no morality among animals.
I'm talking about my behavior.
Yes, but your behavior should be related to other human beings, because animals are separate from human beings.
Oh.
And if they don't have your morality, then that means you're not to be held up against the standard that you hold for yourself.
So you're saying it wouldn't be morally wrong to slit the dog's throat because the dog hasn't got the moral agency that we
The
have?
same morality that you do.
What if I find a mentally disabled person who hasn't got the same moral agency as I
That
do?
doesn't work.
Would it be ethical
No,
for me to
that
slit
doesn't
his
work.
throat?
No, it doesn't work.
Why?
Because he said a person. You said a person.
What
which means-
difference does that make? I thought it was the fact that the animal lacked moral agency that made it moral.
Yes, but just the fact that he's a person doesn't mean that necessarily he's not morally depraved or anything, but he has morality because he's a person.
Okay, but this mentally disabled person literally doesn't.
The fact that don't get yourself into trouble here. The fact that he's mentally disabled doesn't mean that he's not moral.
Not necessarily, but some mentally disabled people do lack an understanding of morals.
No, we don't know. We can't make it a generalization because we haven't probed every mentally disabled person in the
And
world.
have we probed every animal in the world?
We see the animals kill each other for food.
And we see that humans kill each other and rape each other and abuse each other.
The system we're talking about is the circle of life, where one animal would kill another animal for food, where an animal would eat grass. Even what was it that they proved that grass can feel pain and all that? Where yes, where
I don't know if that's correct.
yes, which is again no. Why wouldn't you think so?
Well, because
no,
oh yeah, let me answer that.
what I'm
Because
saying
because
is the way you see how the world with the killing of animals, how fucked up it would be. Don't give it don't give credit to the world that much. Don't make it past the world to be even more fucked up than you think it is.
I understand that,
Maybe
yeah.
even grass is
But
living
like
thing, so it's-
plants haven't got a brain or central nervous system or pain receptors. There's no reason for them to evolve to feel pain. With
Look
mammals,
it up. I saw it in a magazine somewhere.
Okay.
Well, look it up. But I think it is. Which again, why should it surprise you? With all the fucked up things that happen.
so nature's messed up. Everyone's
And
suffering. It's
some humans
horrible.
have adapted to it. And I just don't want it to be a condemnation on them for adapting to a system that they had no part in creating.
Of course.
And your argument is against that system. And I'm trying to get you to Argue against the system itself,
I'm not-
not the humans who have adapted to it.
I mean, I'm not saying that human beings are evil pieces of crap for doing
But-
this to animals.
but the
I
way-
understand. I understand that it's a social norm. We've been brought up doing it. Our parents gave it to us. We've been indoctrinated to think that a cow doesn't matter, but a dog does.
Again, even the way you set this one up, you would come to a conclusion that, but now you know it's wrong. Now it's our responsibility to stop it.
It is our responsibility to stop it.
But I don't agree with this
But
because
okay, if it was you who were the one, if you were born into a cow's body and you were being tortured on a factory farm, would you want to?
No, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense because again, you're conflicting animals and humans. A human will not be born from a cow.
What's the trait difference that justifies harming the animal but not the human? What's the trait difference between the two that justifies this
I
difference?
haven't said that harming a human is not moral. Ooh, made it very, very awkward, right? But yeah, I haven't
But
said
you
that.
do think there's a difference. You do think
There
that.
is a difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the difference?
Well, one is unconscious. Now I'm gonna make the case.
Well, the
not
animal-
Conscious, what was it? Not conscious, but sentient, right? That was the word, sentient. Or not
Do you
sentient.
think that
What was the word? Whatever. That they had like
they have lower intelligence, less moral agency?
intent behind what they're doing, something like this. Free will.
But why? I'm talking about why.
So harming something that doesn't. So now I'm gonna make the case for the animal. Torturing something that doesn't have free will and is not responsible for its actions would be wrong, right? But
I think causing suffering to any sentient being is problematic. Why is that reaction there?
because that is the argument of someone who hasn't experienced suffering from the hand of another human being.
I think probably anyone my age has probably experienced suffering from the hand of
No,
another
no.
human being.
People who decide to torture other people, I'm not saying that it's moral what they're doing.
What I said
What
was,
I'm
I
saying
think
was
that
that-
causing any suffering to a sentient being, that includes human beings, is problematic. Do you think you should be vegan?
Should be. I don't. Well, isn't it a choice?
Technically, it's a choice, but so is whether I beat a dog that I see or slap that person.
And we're not trying to make it a law, so it isn't a choice.
That's a separate question, I guess, but I want to know whether you think you should be vegan.
But
morally.
should means that if I decide to or not to, then
If you do it, it's
should you do
morally
it? Then it's like, is it a choice or no? If it's a choice, then that means it's either way. There's no should. If it's a choice, I can choose to do that. I can choose the other thing.
Do you think it's morally wrong to be a serial cheater and cheat on your girlfriend?
We're talking about food.
Okay, but I know that. But
Because my answer to one would be different to.
just because it's legal to consume animal products doesn't mean that.
Illegal. I said it's a choice. I said that it's.
Why would it be?
default.
Why would it being a choice mean that it doesn't matter either way morally? It's also a choice whether I slap someone in the face. It's a choice whether I cheat on my girlfriend. It's a choice whether.
Slapping someone in the face doesn't necessarily mean it's morally wrong. Maybe someone was out of place and you slap them in the face. That's morally right.
My
actually.
point is the fact that something's a choice doesn't necessarily mean it's
Of
moral.
course.
So should you be vegan?
But again, if you say should, that would cast a judgment. And since it's a choice, it hasn't been decided that it's not a choice.
Of course, it's a choice.
So
Just
I'm
like beating
casting-
your wife is a choice.
Sometimes they find themselves doing things that they haven't chosen to do, but have been pushed to do. I say the wife made the husband beat her. In that case, the hypothetical that we were talking about, not all wives, just in that case that we were talking. Let's say that happened. Has he chosen to do that? If he had a choice not to do it, he wouldn't do it. But she pushed him that way. She played with his emotions that way, and he decided.
I still think it would be morally wrong to beat her, even if
I'm not
she
saying that it's
upset
not.
him.
I'm
But like,
saying
let me
that
ask
you
you this
didn't
one
necessarily choose
question here. If you could live a life where you harm humans, animals, or neither, which would you strive
If I
for?
can
Which
live
would
a
you
life-
strive for?
If I can live a life where we don't harm anything, any animal as well,
Yeah.
of course. If I can live a life where we don't have, where we don't- I speak his language as well.
You'd rather not harm any sentient being if you could.
Yes, of course.
Do you think that being vegan would be closer to that goal?
No.
Do you think that being vegan and not supporting
can take-
factory farming and slaughterhouses, would that mean that you're causing less suffering?
To the animals. Yes. Yes, it would.
So it's closer to the goal of harming neither.
I don't like closer. But I do in extremes. I don't care about the reducing the suffering bit.
I mean, it's impossible for you to abolish suffering right now.
Yeah,
But
well,
we-
you don't know that because we haven't concentrated our efforts.
I mean, there's nothing you could do personally right now to abolish suffering, but you can take steps to reduce the suffering you cause.
I don't want to. I don't want to reduce the suffering. I deal in extremes. I want to eliminate it. It will either be suffering and when we say suffering, that means killing the animal,
Suffering defined as unpleasant experience.
which we don't know that for the animal it is.
Of course it is.
If you kill it right away, it happens in an instant. You wouldn't say that they're suffering.
Right. But what we're talking
Right,
about is
like-
breeding animals 99%
Yes,
from factory
that-
farming.
That I wouldn't care about the reducing bit. No. It's either nothing. Delete it, completely destroyed, removed
don't
from the
bother.
world, or not. Don't bother. Of course, abolish the slaughterhouses and all that.
So you do want to reduce
No,
suffering.
all that thing. I mean, if you want to eat a chicken, raise a chicken, kill the chicken, and eat the chicken. Don't torture the chicken. Don't. For the people that torture animals, get them out of the way. Just stop that, and don't put them in a factory where they'll fill them with injections and all that. Raise it, kill it, eat it. As less suffering as possible, and I don't.
So you
think-
do want to reduce suffering.
No. I mean, what I meant was like when I said kill it. I mean, don't play with it. Just kill it. We don't want it. We feel that it's unnatural. We feel that it's unnatural. Dying.
I don't think it's unnatural. I think it's perfectly
No,
natural.
I
I just
don't
think.
think so.
Well, I think that suffering. I think that suffering and death is natural. Happens all over. Happens all over the animal kingdom.
happens all
I
over
just think that suffering is bad. I think it's an unpleasant experience, and the world will be better if there was less of it.
You don't think suffering is bad?
No, I think suffering is bad, and I think it will be better if there's less of it.
I don't think you. I don't think you really do think that it's natural. I think that it's because it's everywhere, and it happens.
How
all
do you
the
define natural?
Yeah, because natural would mean that it happens in nature, in a way, right? That's what you're defending. What I'm saying is that it's wrong. Like there's something fucked up with it, something wrong. And like, I think that you would feel that there's something wrong with.
I do,
You know, but you would say it's natural because it happens in nature. Yeah. So that's just natural. I meant like, good.
Yeah,
I
I think
that's what I meant. Whereas natural, you meant like in the natural world.
Yeah.
It does happen in the natural world, but
it's bad.
we think it's fucked up, right?
Yeah.
We think it's wrong.
Cool. Well, I appreciate the conversation.